Good morning and welcome back to our Ask the Agronomist video series. We are here this morning with Phil Long. Phil, how's it going?
It's going pretty good this morning.
Trying to stay warm?
Trying to stay warm. Hoping that this will go away.
Yeah, I do too. I was driving in this morning, it was -2 on my car. I'm like, ooh. The worst part is that's not even the wind chill.
Yes, exactly. The wind chill is what gets you.
Well, today, I guess while people are probably just waiting for things to warm up, we're going to be talking about, number one, cover crops, but not only cover crops, but a plan with our cover crops.
Yeah, so having a goal is the most important part. You know, right now you can't see the cover crops. At least in here we got plenty of snow cover, which is a good thing. That's insulating them, so the ones that are trying to overwinter will probably overwinter better that way. But, you know, we always talk about bits and pieces, you know, maybe cost reduction for, you know, using cover crops or how to implement them and stuff like that, but we don't ever give like a plan, a goal, a plan, and a layout of how to do it. So that's what we're going to kind of tackle today.
Okay, awesome. I was going to say, I think a lot of people can't deny that there's many benefits to cover crops, but just how to make those right for your farm is really where we're going to start.
Yeah, we could talk about the benefits all day. I love talking about that, but it's different for every operation, and it affects, you know, the soil types and the landscapes different in every, you know, in every area and region that we, you know, work within. So.
Okay, sounds good. Well, let's get started. We're gonna do a year 1 through 5 plan, and this will actually be posted both in the comments of the video and then also on our blog for further reference. So
Yeah. So we'll just start right out at year 1. So
perfect.
Let's just pretend that year 1 is this year. We're planning for this year, so you know. This wouldn't be changing anything. You know, you can take up this kind of plan and jump in at any year if you're not on corn. We're going to start on corn.
Okay.
So say we're planting corn this year. Corn in most regions is looking more profitable than beans. I mean, so we're going to start with corn in this case. So next year it'll end up being soybeans. So the first thing, you don't need to change anything on the front end, obviously. The back end is where we're going to start in terms of cover crops. So with corn, I'd say the easiest thing to move into is rye. You know, we're going next year into soybeans, so let's plan on flying on a cover crop of rye. You know, when the leaves start to drop, when we get about 50% light down through the canopy. So late August, early September, you can fly on around a bushel or so of rye, maybe a little bit more. It's gonna cost you, and so we'll have costs in these and some offsets too, because we want guys to understand that you're going to be putting money to do it, but you're also going to be getting money back, and that's the part a lot of times guys don't maybe fully interpret and understand all those offsets. So you'd have about $40 an acre once you have seed, flying it on, and then, you know, let's just say a glyphosate burned down in the spring. So that's going to be kind of the layout of there, the cost structure. So you're flying it on in the early fall into standing corn. One side benefit already, guys that have livestock, a lot of guys have, you know, cows and stuff. This is a great opportunity to fall graze. Guys graze stalks anyway, so if you have a cover crop of rye out there in between the rows, they love that. So an opportunity there to get some more feed benefit into your cows. So right there, that's a little bit of an offset. I would say, you know, looking at some of the things you could expect from it. You know, I always say this, but you need to remember that you should be doing this not tilling the soil. So you're taking out those costs of tillage. So that adds up to around $25 an acre. If you're doing, like most guys, doing a fall rip and then a spring cultivate, something like that, to get those stalks worked in and broke down, you're getting rid of that cost. But the other thing is, and I'm not going to repeat this every year, but you need to make sure, no matter where you're at, if you're in Iowa or wherever, that you're checking into your local programs. That's number one. I'm not saying that, you know, that all this should be self-sustained, because eventually, once we get past year 5, you're going to start reaping the benefits without the programs. But there's programs to help get you started. $25 an acre, even $15. You know, whatever it is. There's, you know, we have CSP programs, we have EQIP programs, we have IDOLS programs here in Iowa, and many watershed programs. So no matter where you're at, there's probably some kind of government program that would help you offset some of that cost. If you can't justify it on the fuel savings, the equipment savings, things like that up front, that'll help you get started. So I'll mention that, won't mention it again, but just make sure you do that. The other thing is, for Iowa guys, we also get a $5 reduction on crop insurance. That's $5 an acre. When you're looking at you know, tough, really tight margins right now, every little dollar an acre counts.
Yep,
So,
for sure. I'll say just with that, we're already about only $10 cost minus any state program. So
yeah, exactly.
awesome thing to look into.
There's a lot of guys making money on these. I'm not saying that's the way it's intended, but to get started, that's a you know.
And well, and it's a
you're
benefit
not
for the soil, so that's
Yes,
what the goal is.
Eventually we'll get there. So so if we go on and jump to year 2, so you know next year it's going to be soybeans. We had corn this year, so the best thing to do with rye in year 2, I would say for guys, is to go ahead and kill it early. Kill it a couple weeks before you plan to plant. Kill it with glyphosate, like we mentioned for last year. Make sure it's good and dead before you go to plant soybeans into it. A little later, I'll maybe encourage to plant into it, but in this case, you're still going to probably see some reduction in herbicide. Depending how big that rye got, you might be able to reduce some of those residual herbicides because you don't want to put them down if they're not hitting the ground.
Right.
So remember that, depending on how much rye mat you have out there, you know, it's also an opportunity in the spring if you want to do something like rilage or something for a livestock producer. So another benefit if you have a really good stand come up from that flying on in the fall. So in the fall of year 2, you're going to drill on, you know, let's try some rye and radish. That would be my suggestion. There's other things you could do. You could do just a radish, and then you wouldn't have to worry about killing it next year. But I'm going to say, for the sake of this example, we're going to do rye and radish, and we're going to drill it in after the beans. Now this is the key because drilling it, you know, you have to have a drill, number 1. So that's one thing. If you don't have a drill, you could custom hire it, or you could try spreading it with fertilizer. A lot of co-ops will do that too. Spread it through granular fertilizer. A lot of guys make those applications in the fall. And it works really well. So that's a really quick way to get that out there.
Okay, so let's just talk quick. Why benefits of mixing in radish with the rye?
Yeah, so the radish is going to do a great job at breaking up some of that surface level compaction. It's going to provide some root channels and water infiltration in the soil for next year, you know, because guys get worried about not doing tillage. But this is giving you a natural channel down through the soil, big channels that those corn roots are going to follow the next season.
Right.
There's huge advantages to this. I could talk about that all day, but those corn roots are going to find those channels. Those earthworms, when you're not disturbing the soil, are going to continue to recycle that, and you'd be amazed at how much better your water infiltration rates are, you know, versus tilling every spring.
Okay, so maybe starting to see benefits between year 2 and then beginning of year 3. Into year 3.
So this is why we're doing this 5-year plan, because it's just like no-till or anything else. It's not a short-term benefit.
Right. You
got to plan for at least 3 to 5 years. That's what I tell guys, or you might as well not try it, because it's not going to happen in the first year or 2.
Right.
So you know, rye and radish is a good start there. You know, there's other opportunities there for seeding. Like I said, to custom hire somebody or spread it with the fertilizer. If you have a vertical tillage tool, that's a great way to do it. There's guys that mount Gandies and air spreaders on top of those. That works perfect. But you could always run over with a vertical till. You know, I try not to encourage tillage, but it works really well to work in that seed and make sure it gets established, get some dirt on top of it.
Okay. So what about year 3?
So
have
year
corn
3,
in the ground, going into soybeans.
We're going into corn in year 3, so we're going to want to kill the rye early. Make sure you kill it at least 2 weeks early before that corn, because that's where we run into issues if you have rye out there. That's why I mentioned maybe just try radish if you want to. You know, do something like 3 to 5 pounds per acre of radish. That's going to be more radish than you realize. If you're doing it in a mix, 2 to 3 pounds with rye would be perfect, and still get a lot of that advantage of the soil benefits on that side. So in the fall then on the corn, you're going to do the same as year 1, fly on the rye. Soybeans love rye. I could talk about this all day too, but there's like a synergistic effect between the two. Not only do you reduce your herbicide uses over time, but for some reason they like that challenge. And so this year, after we finish year 3 and go on to year 4, we're going into soybeans. So one thing I want to make note on the beginning of year 4 going into soybeans is try an earlier bean. For your maturity. Try an earlier bean that you know is going to finish earlier, and you can get maybe one of the first couple fields out in the fall, because that'll allow you some more opportunities for seeding different cover crops. And we really don't see that big of a disadvantage in terms of early maturing beans. They have some outstanding yields, and I know when I was in graduate school we did a lot of research on that. If you plant it early enough, you're still going to see a full yield out of that earlier bean. So
Okay.
a great opportunity there, and maybe try drilling it into the rye.
Okay.
And one note on that is it's easier to drill into standing rye or green rye than dead, because once you kill the rye, it's going to start becoming like straw. It's going to be harder to drill into. You know, but the one factor you need to consider on that, it may be easier to drill into green, you know, a wet kind of green material. But the other thing is you always want to think about on any of these years in the spring, especially with rye before it, is what's your moisture like. If it's a wet spring, let it grow. Before soybeans, let it grow. Let it take up that moisture. Once it starts growing tall, it gets scary, but it's not really that scary. It's going to take up excess moisture. You'll be able to get in the field earlier, and it'll use up some of that. If it's turned out really dry early on and staying dry for the planting season, kill it. You know, you don't want to be using that top surface level layer of moisture that your crops need to germinate in. So things right there to keep in mind, but important.
I was just going to ask ideal height to drill into, but I'm sure it depends on the year as always.
Yeah, it depends on the year, and it depends how comfortable you are with it. You know, I would say, you know, there's guys that'll drill into it when it's small. You know, you have little 6-inch rye before it's starting to germinate and grow upwards. And then there's guys that'll plant into 6-foot tall rye. So, like I said, it seems scary when it starts growing real vertical and gets 4 or 5 foot tall.
For sure.
But the soybeans will come through it. You know, the challenges on the production side is with that is insects. Armyworm and cutworm are the biggest things. It's better in those cases to leave it go, let the soybeans pop up out of the ground, give them a chance, and then kill it. I know there's restrictions on that depending on your insurance, but that allows the beans or the corn or whatever to have a chance to grow before you kill that. And then if there are worms out there, they're going to move on to your cash crop. So just a little bit of thing to think about there. A lot of times in our area, it doesn't get that tall. So it's probably not you don't have to worry quite as much about that.
You don't have enough time for it to get that tall.
Exactly. But in a case of a year where it gets wet and we don't get in there, it can happen. You know, don't get scared. You know, just make sure you adjust things and be able to plant in there, make sure that furrow is closing, and take it as it comes.
Okay, sounds good. So other benefits or way you can reduce cost on that year 4?
Yeah, so I mentioned less herbicide use. I think that's the biggest thing with soybeans. What we've seen personally on our farm, and I know a lot of guys have talked about almost reducing to eliminating, you know, even to 1 pass in season. That has given you a lot in soybeans. You know, I would say currently with some of our programs, you know, we have a lot of options on the soybean side, which is great, but it doesn't mean they're cheap options. You know, we're still looking at $40 to $60 an acre in herbicide costs to control weeds in season with soybeans. So once you see some of the allelopathic effects that rye can have for you, it's a herbicide in season. So taking advantage of that is huge, I would say, with soybeans. They don't mind that competition as much as guys think. They'll make up for it, and you know, getting them planted at the right time and stuff, you'll be all right. So.
Okay. So what about going into the 5th year? What are cover crop wise, what should we be doing?
Yeah, some options. I have drill, a rye, and a clover. So I mentioned putting an early bean in so you can get out there if you have a drill or want to, you know, have somebody come in, try a rye and a clover. So you could do that mix, or you could just do clover if you wanted to. But the reason I put those 2 in, you still got the fibrous roots of the rye, which provides a good benefit. Just don't do it near as heavy as you normally would for soybeans. And then you have the benefits of the clover on the nitrogen side. You know, so this is a huge key here. We're going into year 5, getting a little more experienced, hopefully, getting a little more comfortable, and putting a clover down will allow you to gain some of that nitrogen for that falling corn crop. So if you can reduce, you know, your nitrogen in that year 5 with the corn by 50 pounds per acre, that's a lot of savings. So, you know, that's one thing you want to take into account, because the clover is going to add a little bit more. You know, you're looking at probably, depending what your rates are, you're probably more like $45 to $50 an acre. If you put rye in there to terminate in the spring and stuff, you know, you're going to have a little added cost to that. But a little higher cost, but more benefits coming out of it. So, something we don't talk about a lot, and a lot of the guys that have been doing it more than 5 years, they see a lot of these reduced herbicides, controlling the erosion, not losing that resource that we have. The soil is the most important one that you're buying or investing in when you're farming. Those two things are huge, but some of the benefits on the nutrient sides are huge too. You don't realize that there's over 10,000 pounds of nitrogen in the soil, and that organic pool of nitrogen, when you look at P and K, there's at least 2,000 pounds in phosphorus, and probably more like 40,000 pounds of potassium, because potassium makes up the soil. Soil, it's in between those layers of clay and silica and stuff. So there's a lot of it out there, but what you got to realize when you're doing cover crops is that biological activity is doing what some of those biologicals we spray out there do or put in furrow. We're trying to encourage better root growth and better associations with those fungi in the soil. But that's what cover crops do naturally. They're adding that in there with their living roots. As you go through the season, you're continuing that living root cycle, and you're keeping that biological activity moving.
Right.
And so it breaks down those organic pools and creates more available nutrients. There's guys that have reduced all NP and K, all the big ones, and save a lot of money. I'm not saying that you should just cut out all nutrients. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You need to see how it's affecting your farm and see what your organic matter is. You can get at least 20 to 30 pounds of nitrogen from each % organic matter. So if you would increase your organic matter over time, you're seeing a huge benefit on just the nitrogen too. So just keep those in mind, because a lot of guys, they'll try some of this stuff and then they don't reduce some of those costs that they should be. And number one thing is experiment. If you're going to reduce something, try it in strips. Try it in different areas of the field, and then see what the return is.
Okay, sounds good.
So,
awesome. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add this morning?
The biggest thing, this is a topic you could talk about all day, but I would say, guys are thinking, okay, I need some specialized equipment. Yeah, in some cases you do. If you're going to do no-till, you do need, residue openers, things like that on your planter to make it plant into that kind of seed bed. That's number one. But you're also reducing fuel costs and tillage tool usage, machinery costs. You may not even need those pieces of equipment.
Right.
So that's a huge advantage. It takes a little more horsepower to pull, no-till equipment through a field, but you're still saving a lot on fuel just because you're not pulling tillage over the field. So, there's a lot of things to consider. The only last thing I'd say is don't be afraid to fly a cover crop on. Start with rye. Rye seems to germinate on a sidewalk. I mean, it can pick up the moisture and germinate easily, versus a clover or radish or a little harder seed coat to imbibe that water. But don't be afraid to try stuff like that.
Sounds good. Well, thank you very much. Sure many people appreciate this nice plan that we have laid out. So also, I'm sure you're open to answer any questions.
Always open to questions, and
awesome.
We can add to it and make it better, and just encourage guys to try stuff.
Yeah, awesome place to start, that's for sure.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you, Phil, for joining us this morning, and thank you for the listeners for tuning in. Have a good day.